The Whitmore estate stood in solemn silence on the northern hills of Vermont, where morning mist clung lazily to pine needles. Its ivy-clad stone walls and towering glass windows caught the golden sun like honey poured from the sky. A place that seemed untouchable, perfectly safe, until that morning when a scream shattered the stillness, stirring shadows that had never been named aloud. The private jet had landed a day earlier than expected. Thomas Whitmore, 42, white, billionaire, head of Whitmore and Partners Real Estate, had told no one he was coming. On the way from the airport, he'd sent a single message to his driver: back gate, no announcements. Thomas was a private man, sometimes because of business, sometimes because he wanted to see his home as it really was, without the staged perfection prepared for his arrival. The iron gates creaked as they opened. His footsteps echoed softly against the marble floor. Lavender still lingered faintly in the hallway, proof the house had been cleaned thoroughly that morning. Everything felt as serene as always. Then, a scream, sharp, panicked, a child's voice. Thomas froze. Impossible. The only child in this house was Naomi, a 9-year-old black girl he had adopted 4 years ago. After her parents, his closest friends and benefactors, died in a car crash. Naomi had never spoken a word since. Not once. The doctors called it psychological mutism, born from trauma so deep she might never speak again. So whose scream was that? Heart pounding, Thomas sprinted upstairs. The sound had come from Naomi's room, east wing, second floor. The door was ajar. He pushed it open, and what he saw chilled him to the bone. Gertrude Whitmore, his cousin, 10 years older, silver hair pinned in a tight bun, face flushed with anger, stood looming over Naomi, a damp cloth in her fist. Wait a second. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us. Her voice still raised Dee's fury. Naomi was curled in the corner, small and trembling. Her dark curls were a tangled mess, her big brown eyes swimming with tears. She held a worn beige teddy bear tight to her chest, the last gift from her mother before the accident that had taken both parents. Thomas didn't remember crossing the room, only that his heart was slamming against his ribs. What's going on here? His voice came out sharper than he intended. Gertrude turned, startled for half a second, then regained her usual calm. Nothing serious, she said smoothly. I was applying a reflex stimulus method, just like the specialists advised. The child needs to be pushed to the limit if we ever want her to speak again. Thomas crouched beside Naomi, lowering his voice. But you were yelling at her? Naomi, was that you I heard? Did you scream? The girl pressed herself against the wall, refusing to look up. Her lips trembled, but no sound came. Thomas turned back to Gertrude. What exactly did she do to deserve this? She didn't do anything. Gertrude's tone hardened. But you know as well as I do, these children can't be coddled forever. You've spent a fortune on therapy, specialists, caretakers. 4 years. And what's the result? Silence. I won't stand by while she wastes away. Her voice needs to be forced out, whatever it takes. Thomas clenched his fists. In some cold, logical corner of his mind, he knew Gertrude's words held truth. Naomi had been silent for years, locked in a world of her own. But what he had just witnessed, the terror in her eyes, the way she curled up as if bracing for a blow that was not therapy, that was cruelty. And yet, this was Gertrude, the woman who had raised him when his parents were too busy building their empire, the woman who had held his hand through sleepless nights when he was building his first company, the one person he had trusted without question. He exhaled slowly. His voice softened, but it carried an edge. Don't do this again. I won't have her scared like this. Gertrude said nothing, her lips pressed into a tight line. Thomas lifted Naomi gently from the bed. She clung to his shirt, burying her face in his chest as if he were the only safe place left in the world. It's all right, Naomi. I'm here now. You're safe. He carried her out of the room, unaware of the look Gertrude cast after him. Her expression shifted. Pity melted into annoyance. Annoyance hardened into something colder. Anger. And beneath that anger, something darker, like an iceberg lurking under calm waters waiting to break apart into a storm. The Whitmore estate sat shrouded in mist, its ivy-covered stone walls glistening under the Vermont rain. It had always looked untouchable, a fortress of wealth and power. But that morning the truth clawed its way through every brick, every window, hidden cruelty finally spilling into the open. Naomi, 9 years old, black and far too quiet for her age, had not spoken a single word since that night 4 years ago. That night when a twisted mess of steel and shattered glass claimed both her parents. Miriam Carter, a black frontline doctor and Thomas Whitmore's closest friend, and her husband Marcus, who died still holding his wife's hand. Naomi survived only because her mother had shielded her with her own body, as if she were a fragile ember wrapped tight in ash. When Thomas saw her at the morgue, her dress still soaked in blood, clinging to a battered teddy bear, he had whispered only 2 words, "Little one." From that day forward, they became his daughter, at least in name. He gave her everything: therapists, speech specialists, toys, books, a sunlit room with its own balcony. He brought pianists to play private concerts just to see a flicker of joy in her eyes. But Naomi remained silent, locked behind walls no one could reach. Thomas, consumed by board meetings and billion-dollar deals, could only spare a few quiet moments each month to sit by her bed and smooth her hair. And so, Gertrude Whitmore, the cousin who managed his household, became the true warden of Naomi's world. Thomas trusted Gertrude without question. She had raised him when his own parents were too busy chasing fortune. He never imagined that the same woman would one day look at a child with such cold contempt. The day Thomas heard Naomi scream, her first sound in 4 years, Gertrude had called it a breakthrough, a method suggested by therapists to push her past her psychological block. Thomas had accepted it with a tired sigh, grateful for even the smallest progress. He didn't see the way Gertrude's eyes narrowed after he left, cold and calculating. There had never been a doctor's order for shouting, for clawing her fingers into Naomi's arms where bruises wouldn't show, for hurling words like knives. "You think you belong here, you little black rat? You live in this house because of pity? You're nothing. That money, this estate, it should all be mine. Mine and my children's. Not wasted on some charity case like you." Naomi learned to keep her head down, to stare at the floor, to never look Gertrude in the eye. At night, she would curl under her blanket, clutching her worn teddy bear, tears soaking the pillow. Once desperate, she had scribbled on a scrap of paper, "Daddy, I'm scared of Gertrude." She tucked it into the first page of Thomas's work folder, but as always, he was too busy to read it himself. He had handed the folder to Gertrude that morning. "Go through this for me and give anything important to Naomi's therapist." That night, Gertrude dragged Naomi into the kitchen, her grip like iron around the girl's thin wrist. "You tried to expose me. You stupid, stupid child." Her nails dug into Naomi's skin. "I warned you. Maybe it's time you disappeared. Once you're gone, everything falls into place." Naomi hadn't fought back. She hadn't screamed. She just stared at the floor, tears slipping silently down her cheeks, despair hollowing her dark eyes. 2 weeks later, Thomas left for France on a major business deal. The house grew quiet. The second morning of his trip, rain began to fall. Gertrude rose early, dressed as neatly as ever, her silver hair pinned tight. She gave orders in the kitchen, dismissed the staff to the back of the property, then climbed the stairs to Naomi's room. Naomi sat by the window, reading Charlotte's Web, one of the last gifts Thomas had brought her from New York. "Get up." Gertrude's voice was cold. Naomi didn't move. I said, "Get up." Gertrude's hand clamped around her arm, yanking her to her feet. She bent close, her breath sharp against Naomi's ear. "You're not staying here another second. A blow to the back of Naomi's neck sent stars bursting behind her eyes. Gertrude dragged her through the east corridor and shoved open the back door. Rain hammered the stone patio. "Get out of my house!" Gertrude's scream cut through the storm. "I don't want to see you here ever again." Naomi staggered forward, barefoot, shivering. She turned back when she heard a sharp whistle. 2 Dobermans lunged from their kennel, teeth bared, growling. Gertrude didn't unleash them completely, just enough to terrify, to chase. "Run far and don't you dare come back." Naomi bolted into the rain, tears mixing with the downpour, her tiny body vanishing into the woods beyond the estate. Behind her, thunder cracked the sky wide open. The Whitmore estate stood silent again. But this time, a child's absence echoed louder than any scream. Thomas Whitmore stood in the center of his opulent living room. But for the first time, the grandeur meant nothing. The rain outside beat against the windows as if echoing his heart, each drop a sharp reminder of his failure. The laptop screen still glowed on the coffee table, replaying the footage over and over. Naomi, his Naomi, being shoved into the mud, her small frame tumbling, terrified eyes staring back at the woman he had trusted more than anyone. Gertrude's face twisted with venom, her voice hissing insults that still rang in his ears. "This house isn't for trash like you. Get out." Thomas's hands clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned bone white. The shame cut deeper than the anger he had ignored every sign. The bruises on Naomi's arms, Gertrude had dismissed as just a fall. The moments Naomi stiffened when Gertrude approached, the trembling notes she had probably tried to leave for him, the ones he had been too busy to read. And now, she was gone. The sound of boots echoed through the hallway as police officers entered. Gertrude was already in handcuffs, her perfect bun coming loose, her defiance still simmering even as she was led away. "She's just a charity case." Gertrude spat, twisting back toward Thomas. "You took her in because you pitied her, not because you care. I'm your family, not her." Thomas didn't even look at her. His voice, when it came, was like ice. "Take her out of my house." The officers dragged her toward the door, but Thomas stopped them for one final word. "Make sure the charges stick. Every one of them: child endangerment, attempted harm. I'll personally provide evidence for every court in this state." She will never see freedom again. Gertrude's face drained of color, but she said nothing more as the door shut behind her. Thomas exhaled shakily and turned to his staff, his voice carrying an authority sharper than ever. "Search teams. Now. Every wooded trail, every nearby town. Post her picture everywhere. TV stations, social media, radio. I don't care how much it costs. Bring Naomi home." His assistant hesitated. "Sir, with the storm and the woods." "Then we'll search through the storm." Thomas's eyes flashed. "I'll bring in helicopters if I have to. No one stops until she's found." The staff scattered, their footsteps echoing through the hall. The entire estate seemed to pulse with urgency. Radios crackling, phones ringing. Thomas sank onto the couch, his head in his hands for a brief, stolen second. "I'm sorry, little one," he whispered, voice breaking. "I should have been here. I should have protected you." Then, slowly, he straightened. His jaw hardened, his eyes blazing through the haze of guilt. "No more." His voice was quiet, but every syllable burned with steel. "No one will ever touch my daughter again." Outside, the storm raged on, but for the first time in 4 years, Thomas felt something he hadn't dared to before: hope. Because this time, he wasn't going to wait. This time, he would find Naomi himself. Would you like me to continue with Thomas's search for Naomi and how their reunion happens? Or should I write a tense sequence where Naomi struggles to survive alone in the woods before help arrives? The search lasted 2 full days and nights. Every corner of the Whitmore estate, nearby neighborhoods, bus stops, and even local clinics were scoured. Posters with the image of a small black girl, eyes heavy with sorrow, were plastered along streets and shop windows. A helicopter circled overhead, its searchlight sweeping through the misty dawn like it was searching for a lost diamond in a field of stone. Thomas Whitmore never left the command center set up in the study. His once perfectly pressed suits were wrinkled, his eyes hollow from sleepless nights. He drank bitter black coffee without tasting it, his hands trembling slightly as he reviewed every report. Every minute that passed felt like a knife twisting deeper into his chest, part fear, part crushing guilt. On the morning of the second day, a young officer entered, breathless, clutching his radio. "Sir, we found her." Thomas shot to his feet. Naomi had been found in a small public park, sitting hunched on a rain-soaked stone bench, the very park her mother once took her to before the accident. Her small frame was curled in on itself, her lips pale, her skin clammy, her tiny body covered in mud and dew. A jogger had spotted her, thinking at first she was a discarded doll. When Thomas arrived, he didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees, his expensive shoes sinking into the wet ground, and scooped her into his arms. I'm here, Naomi. It's okay now. Daddy's here," he whispered, voice cracking. The girl didn't speak, didn't even lift her head, but she clung to him weakly, trembling like a frostbitten seedling trying to hold on through winter. For 3 days in the hospital, Thomas never left her side. He sat by her bed through every feverish night, wiping sweat from her forehead, pressing soft kisses to her curls. Doctors said she had developed pneumonia, but her heart, though fragile, was astonishingly resilient. Naomi opened her eyes on the third afternoon. The sunlight filtering through the hospital window caught her gaze, and when she looked up, the first thing she saw was Thomas, his tired, reddened eyes fixed on her, his warm hand still holding hers as though he feared she might vanish if he let go. Naomi didn't speak. Not at first. But her lips trembled, and then, unexpectedly, tears streamed down her face. Not the silent tears of despair she'd shed alone all these years, but tears of relief. She reached out, wrapping her thin arms around his neck. "Daddy's here. I'm so sorry, baby." "I'm so sorry," Thomas choked out, his voice shaking as tears finally fell. The billionaire who once dominated Wall Street wept, not for stock losses, not for broken deals, but for the little girl who had sat silently by her bedroom window for 4 long years, who now clung to him, alive. Gertrude was arrested within hours. She didn't fight it. Sitting hunched in a police interrogation room, she no longer resembled the elegant model housekeeper of the elite that society had once praised. Her name and her crimes spread across every major news outlet. Child abuse, intentional physical and psychological harm. Even her own children cut ties with her, unwilling to bear the disgrace. The woman who had spent her life clawing for status had lost everything. After the case closed, Thomas made a decision. He sold the massive Whitmore estate, not for something grander, but for a smaller home, sunlit and warm, with wood-paneled walls and a lavender garden that Naomi's mother would have loved. No gates, no guard dogs, no steel fences, just him, Naomi, and the quiet peace of a home built on love, not wealth. He hired a new piano teacher, Melanie Parker, a black woman in her 30s with a soft voice and a smile that lit up the room. Naomi liked her instantly. For the first time in years, she laughed, an actual laugh, bright and clear. A new therapist came too, Aubrey Tran, a gentle, half-Asian woman who didn't ask Naomi why she wouldn't speak, only whispered, "You don't have to say anything till you're ready." And Thomas, no longer just the man who signed checks and nodded from the doorway, was there every day. Morning milk poured by his own hands, afternoons spent reading in the garden, evenings listening Naomi stumble through her first piano notes. Slowly, haltingly, she played. At first I made wrong notes and shook my fingers. Then weeks later, real melodies began to flow, fragile, tentative, but beautiful. One autumn afternoon, with golden light spilling through the windows, Naomi finished playing Claire de Lune. Thomas sat nearby, silent, watching. When the last note faded, Naomi turned to him, her big brown eyes soft as sunlight. Her lips parted. "Daddy," just one word. Thomas froze. Then he reached for her, pulling her into his arms as his tears finally spilled freely. 4 years of silence, grief, and despair ended in a single word. A miracle, small and simple, but more valuable than every fortune he'd ever earned. To Naomi, he had been daddy all along, and now the world knew it too. Not because he had rescued her, but because she had saved him. A little black girl who hadn't spoken in years had given a man who thought he had everything, the one thing he didn't know he needed, his heart back. There are miracles that don't come from magic, but from silent endurance and unconditional love. Naomi, a little black girl who once lived mute in a cold and indifferent world, made a hardened heart learn to feel Gagai, to love the right way. And Thomas, a man who once believed wealth was enough to fulfill his duty, learned the most precious lesson. Loving a child isn't about giving, it's about being there, listening, and believing. Life may not grant us a perfect beginning, but we can choose a kind ending. And sometimes a single word, daddy, spoken after 4 years of silence, is the brightest triumph of humanity.